Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Shania. So I'm very excited to film today's video for two reasons. One, I'm back finally in front of the camera, even though in my last video I said that I was going to be filming all the time after that. Yeah, I didn't. But I'm also excited for this video because I'm going to be talking to you guys all about my favorite books that I read in the year of 2020. 2020 was a mess. I mean, it was a complete mess, not only for me, but for the world, and I feel like just for everybody. And even though I spent most of the time at home, all my classes were online, I didn't read very much. I'm gonna come out and tell you guys right off the bat that I only read 55 books in the year 2020, and I had a reading goal set for 100. And honestly, I'm so upset with myself because I really thought I was gonna hit that, because at the beginning of 2020, I read basically 55 books and didn't really read any after that. So yeah, I'm very disappointed in myself, but at the same time, it was a crazy year. And if you guys saw my last video, you guys know the reasons why it was so crazy for me personally. Although I only read 55 books in 2020, that doesn't mean that I didn't read some amazing books. And there are a couple on this list that I'm going to share with you guys that are absolutely like some of my all-time favorite books, and that is a success for me in itself. So with that, let's go ahead and start talking about all the books that I really enjoyed in the year of 2020. Alright, so getting into my favorite books of 2020, I just quickly want to say that these books are in no particular order. I'm going to be sharing 10 of them with you today, and I'm not going to be ranking them 1 through 10 or anything. I'm just sharing them with you as I go along. So going into the very first book, I loved this one so much, and it was actually the very first book I read in the year 2020, and we really started off with a great book, and that was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. So I've talked about this book on my channel a couple times, so you guys probably already know how much I loved it, but this book I gave 5 stars because it was so beautifully written. I cried my eyes out constantly through it, and the ending is what really got me. But if you guys haven't heard of this book, I'm surprised because it is hyped up so much, and it came out in 2019, didn't come out in 2020, but it came out in 2019, and I believe that it's Delia Owens' debut novel, which is incredible for it being her first novel and being so well written like that. But gosh, you guys, it is so good. It's hyped. It's on the New York bestsellers list, and it's also part of Reese Witherspoon's book club. If you guys haven't heard of that, she like hypes up all of the best books, and this was definitely one of them, and it's hyped for good reason. If you guys haven't heard of this book or you don't know what the plot is, it follows a girl named Kaya, who is also known as the Marsh Girl, and I believe it takes place during the 1950s through to the 1970s, so you're kind of getting a historical fiction book in there, but it is phenomenal. The book kicks off by following a murder mystery that happened in the town of Barkley Cove, and we have a detective who's trying to figure out what happened to this young man who was very popular in the town, who ended up dying by falling off a water tower, I think that's what it was. While the detective and the town don't know exactly who killed this young man or if it was a suicide by chance, they do point fingers towards Kaya because she is an outcast and she lives in the marsh where nobody else lives and kind of is just seen as a recluse. Throughout the book, you're really getting to know Kaya's story, what happened, why she is all alone, and what happened to her family. And it's so good, you guys. It's so good. If you haven't picked it up, you definitely should, because it really goes through her life. You really get to see her development from when she's a young girl to the point that she's at in the regular timeline of the book. And the ending, like the ending is so good. And gosh, oh my gosh, you guys, I loved it so much. And I don't want to spoil it or anything like that, but it definitely is a 5-star book for me. It's a 5-star book for a lot of people for a really good reason. And it's one of those historical fictions that you can't pass up. You just can't pass it up. So highly, highly recommend this one. So glad that I started the year 2020 with this book. It really made my reading experience that much better, and I feel like this is a book that I definitely will go back and reread at some point. Alright, so moving on to the next book. This one should be of no surprise for you guys. If you guys know me and you know my reading taste, then you know that this book was definitely going to be on there whether I hated it or not, because gosh, I love this author. You guys know I love this author. I rave about her all the time. Anything she writes, I adore it. So this one was going to be no exception to that, and that is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. House of Earth and Blood was definitely one of my most anticipated books ever, but definitely was my highest anticipated book of the year 2020. I was just so excited for this one. It was her first adult novel. It took place as an urban fantasy, and it was 800 pages long. So exciting. And it's a new series, and so 800 pages is a lot, but you know what? We're getting more books, and I'm very excited about it. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars because I didn't love all of it, but I loved most of it, so that's why it's definitely on this list. I adored this. I thought it was great. My favorite thing about this book is the main character, Bryce. She's phenomenal. One of the best heroines that Sarah J. Maas has written, and you guys know I love Selena Sardathian from the Throne of Glass series, but this one, Bryce is just so great. However, like I said, there's some things that I was really disappointed about, but I'm not going to talk about this book too much because I do have a full extensive video on what I liked and what I didn't like about this book, and if you guys want to check it out, I'll have it linked up above and down below for you. But I definitely would check that out if you guys want to know a little bit more about this book. I don't spoil anything in that video, so highly recommend checking out that video. However, if you guys haven't heard of this book, it's Sarah J. Maas's new adult, it's not even new adult, it's just categorized as an adult book, and it's an urban fantasy that takes place in the Crescent City, and we follow a bunch of different characters. It's in a third-person point of view, very similar to Throne of Glass, if you guys have read that series by Sarah, and it deals with, I'm trying to remember right now, but it deals with Bryce, who is seen as a party girl, and she goes out one night with her friends. She's having a good time. She's drinking, doing drugs, whatever, and she comes back and finds out that her friends, her closest friends, are all murdered by a demon, and the mystery for what the demon, like who sent the demon or who killed all of her friends, goes unsolved for 2 years. But we also have new characters being introduced, like Hunt Athalar, who is seen as like the love interest in this book, and a bunch of amazing other characters. There's one character whose name is Tristan in this book, and he was like the funniest thing ever. I loved him so much. But I definitely recommend checking out this book. If you guys haven't read any books by Sarah J. Maas, honestly, I don't even know. I feel like I should make a guide to Sarah J. Maas, like a whole video on guide to what you should read. If you guys want to see that, let me know, because I'd be really excited to do that. But I feel like if you guys are going to read a book by her, this might be a pretty good one to start with. Her writing's gotten a lot better, and there's a lot more character development in this book, and also she's gotten a lot better with this one, and it's not, even though it's an adult book, it's not as, well, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I was going to say it's not as graphic, but you know what? This one's pretty dang graphic, and the F-bomb is used frequently. But when it comes to, like, sex scenes, not as much in this book. So, but yeah, let's go back to that on, if you guys want to see a video on a guide to Sarah J. Maas, let me know. But anyways, this book is great. I love it. I'm a little bit biased, I will say, because I love Sarah J. Maas so much. But I still loved it, and I was able to critique it quite a bit in that one video where I talk about this book the whole time. So yeah, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Couldn't go wrong. All right, moving on to the next book. I don't actually have a physical copy of this book because I read it through Kindle Unlimited, and that is The Guy on the Right by Kate Stewart. Oh my goodness, you guys. I have raved about this book so much, and it's so good. It's one of the cutest stories I've read. I was laughing constantly with this one. It was just overall an amazing book, and absolutely devoured it in like a day. So this book is actually the first one in a series by Kate Stewart. We have the first one, the guy on the right, and then we also have the guy on the left and the guy in the middle. However, I will say that my absolute favorite is the guy on the right. I think it's so good, and it doesn't even compare to the other two at all. It's just on its own tier. It's amazing. But this book deals with our two characters. We have Theo and we have Lainey, and Lainey is very outgoing. She is very social. She's very spontaneous in her actions. She just does whatever she's feeling, and that is a complete opposite for the personality that Theo has. Theo is quiet. He's kind of seen as a band geek and doesn't really like to do anything out of the norm. So when the two become best friends, it is just crazy. It's crazy. And Lainey brings out the best in Theo, and Theo brings out the best in Lainey. Highly, highly, highly recommend this book if you guys haven't checked it out. Okay, so moving along, the next book that I have on my list of favorite books of 2020 was one of my most anticipated books again of the year, and it did come out this year, and it was fantastic. I absolutely adored it. It was actually a struggle for me at first to read this, but when I got through it, it was so well worth it. And that is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. So this book was categorized super weird. It was categorized as a Slytherin romance, but once you read it, you'll understand why. I've described this book on my channel before as this, and it's super weird, but the way I described it was kind of like the game, if you guys have ever played. It's called, I'm not gonna swear, but it's like Sleep With, Marry, or Kill. So you take 3 people and you categorize them into each category. However, in this book, we only have one person that's gonna fit all 3 categories, because our main character, which I forget her name right now, Alessandra, she has this plan because boys have just always done her wrong, and the last guy that she was with was terrible. So she decides to be a badass and do things herself, and she wants to become the Shadow Queen. Honestly, the first 50 pages of this book were super boring for me because the writing style was something I really couldn't get into. So I feel like if you guys are reading it and you're 50 pages in or less and you're just like, I don't like this, push through it. I swear. It gets so good, and I loved the ending of this book as well. Honestly, it wasn't something that I saw coming, and it was great. It was great. I loved a Slytherin romance, and I want more of them. Alright, the next book is another one that I don't have a physical copy for, which is really disappointing. Like, I don't know why I don't have a physical copy of this book or any of this author's book. I really don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I need to get that. I need these like physical copies of this author's book in my hands. But the next book is one, oh my gosh, I love this book so much. I'm so excited to talk about it. But that is Credence by Penelope Douglas. So what do I mean by taboo? Well, let's talk about it. Alright, so the main character's name is Tiernan, and she grew up with celebrity parents, and they just like paid no attention to her. They were always just so in love with each other that they didn't have any love for her. So they end up passing away together. Like, they decide that they're going to die together, and they leave Tiernan as basically an orphan because she is only 17 at the time of her parents' deaths. However, after her parents die, she comes to find out that she has a step-uncle, that her dad actually had a stepbrother that she's never heard of, and he makes contact with her and says that she has to come live with him because that is how the law works, and she's the closest relative, or he is the closest relative, so she has to go live with him. So she ends up moving to Colorado in the mountains with her step-uncle and his 2 sons, which really are basically her step-cousins. And from her living with them, she ends up having a relationship of some sort with all 3 of them. One of her relationships with one of the guys in the book, I loved it so much. I love that guy. I think he's great. And yeah, it's great. 5 stars. Easily 5 stars for me. It is my favorite Penelope Douglas book at this point. Love this book so much. Highly recommend, as I recommend all of these books. But definitely check out this one if you guys want a very, very steamy romance. So we're on to number 8, and I love this book so much. And this is Beach Read by Emily Henry. You guys, if you're looking for a really good enemies to lovers romance. Oh, this is it right here. This came out this year, and let me tell you, it was amazing. I think it was on like the top 10 romances for Goodreads, and gosh, I loved it so much. It was so good. There were so many good lines in here. I really liked the relationship between the couple, and it was so good. So in this book, we have two authors. We have Augustus, who writes basically like literary fiction, and then we have January, who writes romance. And they're just like seen as enemies because they don't believe in each other's writing. They just always just have never gotten along. However, through various circumstances, they end up becoming neighbors, and through that, they formalize a deal to help each other out because both of them are in writing slumps, and they think, well, which one of us is going to get out of this? And they decide to swap genres. So January is going to write literary fiction, and Augustus is going to write romance, and they're going to see if they can get out of their slumps. And throughout that, a romance blooms. But this book is phenomenal. If you guys are a big romance reader or you want to get into romance, I think this book would be a really good start for you, or a really great add to your library, because it's so good. We have such great character development. We have a slow burn romance. If you guys are into that trope, this definitely is one to look at. And yeah, I loved Augustus. I thought he was like dark and demented, which I feel like you kind of have to be to write literary fiction, but he was great. There was a couple parts where I was like, this is weird. I think I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars just because I didn't understand a couple parts. I was a little lost, I think, on what was happening in the book and how it pertained to the overall plot, but super good regardless, and yeah, highly recommend. Alright, the next book that I have for you guys is another ebook, and it is bizarre. But if you guys follow a lot of romance booktubers, you guys have probably heard of this series once or twice, and that is the Ice Planet Barbarian series. You guys, this series, like, I saw it so many times on different booktubers channels, and I was like, that just looks so bizarre. Like, how could we be into humans hooking up with blue aliens? But you guys, I read the first book in like a night, and it was so steamy and so good. Oh my god, I was like, whoa. Because like, I feel like once you like, if you're a romance reader, and I don't know if everybody like feels the same way, but I feel like you become desensitized to a lot of things that are happening in books, especially like steamy content, because you just get used to it. So it's like not as hot anymore. But like when I read this, I was like, oh, okay, this is different. This isn't just like your typical like college student romance or anything. This is out there. And like Ruby Dixon just took it to like the next level, and I was here for it. Anyways, it was just like, it was good. It was really good. Basically the whole premise of the entire series almost is these humans are being abducted by these bad aliens. Like all these girls that are in their like early 20s are being abducted, and they all have something in common. They're, you know, young, but they also have no family ties. And they get abducted, and that's how like the beginning of the series starts. Is we have our main character Georgie, who is in a spaceship, and she's trying to figure out how to like get back to Earth, and then the spaceship crashes and they end up on this like ice planet, and Georgie is the leader of the group, and she ends up going out to find shelter because it's freezing. And she ends up running into the leader of the blue aliens. If you guys need some steam, there it is. I would just check it out. I know it sounds weird, but it's well worth it. I promise. I promise. Alright, so for the very last book of my favorite books of 2020, we have one that I should have read a long time ago. I can't believe I can even call myself a romance reader without reading this one, but that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. Now, let me tell you guys, if you want like a regular office type setting enemies to romance book, enemies to romance book, enemies to lovers romance book. This is it for you, I promise. So as it sounds like, this follows Lucy and Joshua. They both are assistants for co-CEOs of a company, and they do not get along at all, because prior to them becoming, co-workers, they actually were assistants for CEOs of different companies, and they were enemy companies, and then they decided to merge the two companies together, and Joshua and Lucy just do not like each other. And a promotion comes about where they both are going to be fighting for this promotion, and that just makes their enemy status that much more serious. And from there on out, we have just a lot of sexual tension happening between them. And I've heard that this one is going to be a movie, actually. They're filming for this book right now, and Lucy Hale is going to be playing the main character, Lucy. So that's pretty cool, and I'm excited to see that because I think it would be a really good movie too. If you guys haven't read this already, then you guys are like me and you're late to the game. But definitely check it out if you haven't, and if you guys haven't read it before, let me know what you guys thought of it in the comments down below. Okay, so those are all the books that I absolutely enjoyed in the year of 2020. If you guys had any similar books to mine that you really enjoyed, let me know down below. But yeah, I loved all 10 of those books, and I do plan on doing a video for the disappointing reads I had of 2020 as well. So stay tuned for that, and I hope you guys had a great 2020, or at least as good of a 2020 as you could have had, and let's hope that 2021 is a lot better. So with that, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!